This is Agriculture Today. Good to have you aboard once again. Our cattle market insight this week is offered up by livestock economist Derrell of Oklahoma State University, and he has a host of things to discuss not only on the markets currently, but on our ongoing dry weather, not only here in Kansas and Oklahoma, but elsewhere in the plains and even further beyond, and the ensuing potential impacts on the cattle markets ahead. But Derrell, to the trade this past week, first of all, and sort of a steady-as-she-goes mode in these markets, isn't it?
Really is. Feeder cattle markets are, holding pretty well. Of course, we're kind of looking for being at about a spring peak here in this March time period, and we've kind of seen that. We saw fairly seasonal kinds of increases through January and February, holding on pretty well at this point, and that's kind of remarkable given some of the dry conditions we have in some places. Fed cattle markets, kind of the same thing, steady to maybe slightly weaker recently, but really holding together pretty well in the face of relatively large supplies of available cattle.
So do we revert back to ongoing steady demand as the thing propping these markets up?
Well, I think you have to. If you look at boxed beef prices at the wholesale level, they've continued to maintain very well. Actually, it's been a slow grind higher. And again, we kind of expect that seasonally, but holding up remarkably well. Beef production is up for the year as expected, and will be up for the year as we go through the year. So the supply challenges are there, but apparently demand is keeping up with it at this point. It's holding the wholesale prices level, and that's helping support these fed cattle and feeder cattle prices.
Is there anything even on the remote, immediate horizon that would shake any of these trends one way or the other?
Well, I think the demand side is clearly the key, and it's the biggest unknown as we go forward. It's always harder to kind of get a read on it, but obviously when you think about the macroeconomic impacts and some of the potential policy impacts that could come back into these markets, there's certainly some potential there from those sort of external factors. Within the beef industry, there's no real sort of imbalance that I would see. I think these markets are all relatively well in line with each other, so unless something does change, there's no reason to expect changes, but there's plenty of potential for change in that external environment.
And that one wild card that you hinted at there, the political side of things, our trade concerns, nobody knows where all of that is going because there's so much rancor right now about our trade postures, but that definitely will have an influence one way or the other eventually, will it not?
Oh, I think so. In fact, I think it probably is having some impact now just because there's a lot of uncertainty about it and exactly what's going to happen as well as how to measure the impacts of that. Markets don't generally like uncertainty, so there's a certain, you could call it a risk premium that's in the market now. We don't really have the ability to measure it very well. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, depending on what we actually do from a policy standpoint, it could have significant impacts. And those will be a number of direct impacts. If we start with steel tariffs, for example, there'll be a bunch of direct and secondary effects related directly to those steel markets. But then, obviously, the potential politically for retaliation and other things could spread very quickly into a host of relatively unrelated markets. And it's just at this point impossible to really anticipate what those are. But again, it's certainly a big source of uncertainty at this point.
And before we leave that subject, again, it's back to consumers' disposable income, and if routine goods escalate in price because of these potential tariffs, why that could come back to resonate on the cattle market in terms of pressure on beef demand.
Absolutely. Again, if you think about it, and of course the thing to keep in mind about a tariff is ultimately it's going to be paid for by consumers and other businesses in the U.S. So businesses that use steel are going to have higher cost and have impacts, and that can affect, incomes and employment in those industries. Higher steel manufacturing costs may lead to higher machinery costs, and that has impacts on other producers. Think about ag producers specifically. And then, of course, eventually it's going to trickle its way all the way to consumers in terms of higher food costs as well as directly higher costs for things that use steel. So just in one example there, you can see that those impacts can be much more widespread than perhaps initially realized.
Derrell, one thing that is more certain, regrettably, and that would be the extraordinarily dry weather, again, not only here in the Central Plains, but to beyond, and the potential impact on our beef cattle productivity. And there is a genuine concern that this situation may have legs, unfortunately.
It really can. We've seen some fairly significant changes in the last couple of weeks regionally in terms of that drought. We've actually improved the drought significantly in some of the more eastern areas. That would include eastern Oklahoma, East Texas, and some points east of there. At the same time, west of there, the conditions have continued to deteriorate. In Oklahoma, we have a mesonet system that gives us some really handy data, and one of the things in there right now is that there's 9 counties in northwest Oklahoma and the panhandle of Oklahoma that have gone more than 155 days with less than a quarter of an inch of rain. And so that just highlights the fact in this last week's drought monitor map, we got to the point where 3 to 4 counties in Oklahoma now start to emerge with D4, the exceptional drought conditions. That is the worst rating in the drought monitor system. And that's a fairly small area right now, surrounded by a large area of extreme drought conditions, and without some imminent moisture, that D4 area is going to grow very rapidly here in the next few days and weeks.
And ditto that here in the state of Kansas, to be certain. The repercussions of a spring drought. Well, we have a feel for what happens in late summer when it dries out, and that's not atypical, but this sets the table for potentially negative consequences for beef producers.
I think an early onset drought is a particularly big challenge for producers. We certainly experienced that in 2011 in the Southern Plains when we had a similar situation. There's a couple reasons for that. One is just the timing of that. Obviously, you come out of winter, you've drawn down your forage supplies usually to very low levels, and if you don't get that early spring growth, you go very quickly into a very severe management situation. And so, if you don't get any growth at all, then it makes the whole year loom large right away. The other challenge is that a lot of these spring calving cow herds, you got baby calves on the ground, you've got the cows in their highest nutritional requirements of the year at a time when you're trying to, skimp and stretch limited feed supplies, and if you're not careful, that can be a very costly kind of impact, one that may actually delay some of those costs into subsequent reproductive performance in the herd. And so it's just a really tricky time when you have to deal with a drought in the first half of the year as opposed to maybe a more typical situation later in the year.
Now, it's too early to call, but the potential is there for a significant downsizing of cattle inventories if this drought persists and summer grass prospects start to dwindle. Is that not the case?
It certainly is. Again, given the timing of the year, take those spring calving herds again. Right now, they really don't have any cull animals around. There's no obvious place to cut without really cutting significantly into the most productive parts of the herd. If you can hang on until those calves get a little bit older, you're probably your first best bet for those spring calving herds will be looking at early weaning. Get those calves out of there and reduce the cow's nutritional requirements. Then it may be more feasible to kind of limp them along and get by. Hopefully, of course, things change and improve at some point. But again, you just don't have a lot of flexibility this time of the year. It makes it a real challenge.
These are all unknowns. This could turn, but we need to be seeing some rainfall soon in these areas to avoid these circumstances, Derrell.
That's right, and we have plenty of time actually because of the nature of these regions. They're warm season forages. They don't really, we've got another month before they're really going to start trying to grow really aggressively. If we get rain in that time period, then we can forget about all of this pretty quickly. But if we don't get it, again, we've got to have made some preparations for this. And, we could see some herd liquidation happen relatively quickly if these conditions continue this severe, and certainly if they spread anymore. One thing that is a bit of a positive relative to, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago when we had much wider spread drought conditions farther east is that there's a much smaller percentage of the total herds that stands to be impacted. Mm-hmm. These western areas have low stocking rates and lower, and so we wouldn't see as many total numbers of animals impacted impacted, and that reduces the chances that we see as significant of general market impacts if we get into a situation where we're liquidating a lot of these animals.
Let's hope for rain to alleviate.
That would be the best solution.
You bet. You bet. And before we let you go, as you look at the trading week ahead, any reason to think we'll see much movement one way or the other in these markets?
Nothing out there really to suggest any major changes at this time. Again, we're kind of at that sort of spring peak time for feeder cattle markets, maybe fed cattle markets and box beef markets. So we may see some seasonal change over here, but nothing that really stands out as being imminent or really dramatic at this point in time.
Very good. We always appreciate the comments and the input, and we will catch up with you again in a few weeks from now. Derrell, thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm.
He is Derrell Peel, livestock economist out of Oklahoma State University, providing those remarks on the cattle market trends and the factors influencing those trends, opening up this Monday edition of Agriculture Today. We'll be back in a moment on the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. We're back now on This Agriculture Today and reporting now on a new advance out of the College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University. It's in response to a recurring health problem yet in beef cattle, and that would be liver abscesses. Our guest now has been toiling away at this challenge in cattle production for a number of years now, and they've come up with a novel new approach to it. T.G. Nagaraja is over from the Veterinary Medicine College at K-State, where he serves as a University Distinguished Professor of Microbiology. We need to probably refresh folks on the seriousness of the liver abscess problem in the beef cattle industry, T.G. The numbers are pretty staggering, actually.
Yes, it is, Eric. Liver abscesses would be what I call a nutritional disorder, because in the feedlot industry, we feed grain to make beef production more profitable. And with high grain feeding, what happens is there is increased acid production in the rumen, because starch in the grain is very rapidly fermented by microbes that live in the rumen of cattle. And that increased acidity is responsible for causing the bacteria from rumen to cross the rumen wall, enter the blood supply, and end up in the liver. And in the liver, they start growing and cause abscess. So essentially, this is a problem of high-grain fed cattle. And if you feed more roughage in the diet, then the problem almost disappears or reduced significantly. I have been working on this problem for a long time. We have identified the bacteria that cause the disease. And the one that causes is called Fusobacterium necrophorum. And this is a bacterium that lives in the rumen of cattle, and it is beneficial in the rumen. But once it leaves the rumen and goes to the liver, then it becomes a disease-causing organism. What we have tried to do is to understand how a bacterium that is beneficial in the rumen could become a disease-causing bacterium in the liver.
And that's been the mystery that you're still trying to uncover?
Exactly. So this is an example of where a basic research could give us clues as to what we can do to solve the problem. So the question we asked was, how could this organism be able to survive in the liver? Because liver is known to be a very well defensed organ. It has a lot of blood supply. It has a lot of what we call white blood cells, which are the first defense of the body to combat microbes. So the reason why this bacterium survives is because it produces a protein, and we call it a toxin, exotoxin. It is secreted, and this protein kills those white blood cells. Therefore, the defense mechanism of the liver is compromised, and that's how it's able to survive. in the liver. But before it goes to the liver, it has to cross the rumen wall. And to make that happen, the bacteria have to attach to the cells lining the rumen of cattle. And most bacteria use some kind of a structure to make that attachment possible. We have identified that Fusobacterium has a protein on the cell surface, on the bacterial surface, that mediates attachment of the bacteria to the epithelial cells. And we have identified the protein. And we have, in fact, we are able to identify the gene that is responsible for making that protein. And we are able to clone that gene in E. coli. That way we can produce what we call a recombinant protein, which is a lot easier to produce to make a vaccine. Mm-hmm. So our concept now to prevent liver abscess would be to have a vaccine that contains this protein that makes attachment possible, and then also has leukotoxin that makes the bacteria survive in the liver. So the concept is very simple. If we can prevent attachment of the bacteria to the rumen wall, then it won't cross the rumen to go to the blood. Even if it does and reaches the liver, if we have antibodies, that's what the animal will produce to combat when we vaccinate. If those antibodies could neutralize the toxin the bacteria produces, then the liver can easily get rid of the bacteria. So this is what I call it kind of a two-pronged approach. One, to prevent attachment at the initial stage of infection. Second would be when it reaches the liver to prevent its setting up shop in the liver. So our idea is if we develop a vaccine that has both those proteins, that may be more effective in reducing liver abscess. So the university has we have a partnership with an animal health company that is investing money to develop this vaccine. Mm-hmm. And we have the vaccine, and it is right now being tested in cattle. But we don't know the results yet. So the idea would be to collect blood samples and look at antibody levels, which would indicate the animals are producing antibodies against these two proteins. And then in about 3 months, we would know whether this vaccine has any promise in terms of preventing or at least reducing liver abscess.
But you have confidence in this vaccine protocol and this treatment that could get the job done.
Yes, because we have done some studies in laboratory animals, like in mice. And we've been able to show that these proteins do induce antibodies in mice. Those vaccinated mice can resist infection caused by Fusobacterium. So we have some indication that these proteins would be effective. Whether it proves effective or not in cattle, that needs to be seen.
If it does prove this vaccine to be effective in mitigating liver abscess issues, this could be a step forward in a lot of ways. For one thing, it addresses the costliness of liver abscesses to the industry. That's in the millions and millions of dollars, right?
Yes.
And in terms of treating animals that have incurred abscesses, have developed abscesses, antibiotics heretofore have been used in that respect. Is that right?
Yes, it is. You are correct, Eric. The industry has been using for the past almost 35 years an antibiotic called tylosin. And that is effective in reducing the problem, but it does not eliminate the problem. We still have liver abscess, but at a significantly lower level than if we don't use the antibiotic. Mm-hmm. And as you know, antibiotic administration in the feed is not highly favored these days. And in fact, FDA has now a regulation that you cannot feed antibiotics for growth promotion.
The veterinary feed directive.
That's the veterinary feed directive. And all antibiotics should be under a veterinary prescription now. But tylosin is not for growth promotion. It is intended to prevent a disease. But even then, anytime we feed an antibiotic, there is a chance that bacteria will develop resistance, and that could be transferred to bacteria that could cause human infections. Tylosin is a class of antibiotic which is very similar to a human antibiotic called erythromycin. They have exactly very similar structure. And in a bacterium that becomes resistant to tylosin will also be resistant to erythromycin. So that's why the industry is looking for other ways to prevent the problem without having to use antibiotic. And vaccine, to me, would be the best approach.
If this vaccine proves out and is deemed effective in the ways that you're hoping and expecting it to, this could be a major step forward against liver abscesses in cattle, could it not then, TG?
Oh, this would be, because particularly if it proves to be very effective and more effective than antibiotic. So not only we are controlling a problem of reduced liver abscess or eliminate the problem completely. At the same time, we will cut down the use of antibiotics in cattle. And reducing liver abscess would have a significant economic impact to the industry, because liver abscesses are, in a way, they cost money to the producers. Mm-hmm. In addition to the condemnation of the liver that invariably happens in a slaughterhouse, cattle with liver abscesses, a number of studies have shown they don't perform as well. They don't gain as much. They don't eat as much. So if you have a vaccine to prevent this problem, so we might be improving the profitability of feedlot production.
If you want a number, the West Texas A&M University study indicated that liver abscesses cost the beef industry something like $56 million annually. It's serious business. So hopefully you'll receive results back soon on the efficacy of this vaccine.
I should hope so. I think we should know sometime in July or August as to what the outcome of this study that is ongoing right now.
Well, we'll hopefully have you back soon and see what the tally is on that. And if, in fact, this is going to be one of the critical answers to the liver abscess problem in beef cattle.
Well, I'll be happy to come back to you, Eric, to talk about particularly if the vaccine proves very effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for briefing us right here, TG, on what's been accomplished to date. And the best of luck in receiving positive feedback on this vaccine.
Thank you, Eric.
He's TG Nagaraja, and he is a microbiologist in the College of Veterinary Medicine, Kansas State University. He and his team have come up with this vaccine protocol, which may, in fact, be one of the key answers to preventing liver abscess development in beef cattle, particularly in the feedlot setting. And you're listening to Agriculture Today. We'll be back in a few moments with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. True Leaders in Service is a national 4-H community service project created as a way for all 4-H members to say thank you to their communities, counties, and states for the support they provide to 4-H. The month-long True Leaders in Service officially kicks off April 1st. As part of this effort, Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw says that Kansas 4-H members are being encouraged to identify projects in their communities that they'd like to tackle during April. Beth, this is a new project, relatively new project. The True Leaders in Service actually started last year, and Kansas 4-H is kind of jumping on board this year.
Yes, we want to make everybody aware of this opportunity. This is an opportunity to be part of a national effort, the True Leaders in Service, where we encourage clubs to look at and plan some kind of a service project in April.
This is very similar to what they would do for the 48 hours of service.
Yes, the 48 Hours of 4-H project this year will be in our 5th year of that, and that has been a state effort, and, we've been really thrilled with what's happened there. And so this is kind of exciting to be able to be part of a national effort.
What are some of the things that people should be thinking about as they try and get involved with this?
I think the first thing that everybody needs to think about is that this just makes total sense for 4-H. In our pledge, we say, I pledge my hands to larger service. That's a familiar phrase to all of us. And so the other piece is that Community service is something that we have been learning a lot about, and it's part of our 8 critical elements when we talk about being essential to positive youth development. It allows young people to develop a sense of pride and ownership in their community, and it also allows youth and adults to work together while helping others. And finally, community service allows young people to build discipline, foster respect for others, promote civic responsibility, and also participate in real-world career-related experiences.
This part about working together with the community, I think, is what is really important because it gives them a chance to identify things that they would like to tackle within their communities.
Definitely. And, everybody can look around in their community and see things that probably need to be done. And that's one of the really important parts of the True Leaders in Service Day, and that is that it's something that needs, that meets community needs, and it's meaningful action. So that activity needs to be necessary and valuable to the community.
And what type of things would they tackle, do you think?
Oh, I think the list is very broad, and, it's really about whatever is needed in your community. So that might be things like food drives, it might be cleaning up parks or other things in the community. There may be other needs. It might be reorganizing the food bank, painting the shelves at the library. It's whatever is really needed in their community where they can make a difference. And really, the opportunity and of what these projects could be is just, it's huge. It could be anything.
One of the opportunities here, then, is to meet with some of the community leaders and others and discuss some ideas?
Definitely. There are wonderful community partnerships all across our state for 4-H. And those same kind of folks, they're interested in what's going on in the community as well. So, some of those organizations might be their county commissioners, their extension board, maybe some of those community service type clubs, the Master Gardeners, Chamber of Commerce, or the school district. There's just all kinds of groups out there that are also going to see the need for some service happening in the community.
I know one of the things we like to do is kind of track how many people get involved in service projects. Is this something that we'll be able to kind of get some feedback on and find out later on who did what?
Yes, I think so. When I look at what the national project's done in the past is they have an interactive map up on the computer where you can see who has taken part. So, similar to the projects that we've done with 48 Hours of 4-H, there's a sign-up website, and then there's also a reporting website. And, certainly we in Kansas 4-H would love to see people upload those photos to our Facebook page and Twitter as well, tagging Kansas 4-H, because we want to know what's going on.
Well, then that's a great way to really let the entire country know what's going on with Kansas 4-H is by getting out there and doing some things that you can put on social media and let people know how involved they are.
Definitely, and how exciting to, be part of a joint project that's happening all across the United States.
In terms of registration and getting signed up for that, what should people be thinking about?
Well, now's the time to be having those discussions in your club about if you'd like to take part this year. And then there's a registration form. It's an online form, and they ask that people get their projects signed up by April 30th and actually do those projects, sometime in the month of April. And then they would like people to report on them by the 15th of May.
So there will be some follow-up, and people will have a chance to report back on how successful their projects were.
Yes. And what they're calling True Leaders in Service Day is April the 28th, which is Saturday, which if it works to have your service project that day, that's great, because that's when everybody is shooting for. But any time during April, because we know there's other things going on sometimes, and maybe one certain day won't work.
Well, and this is really a great time to be doing this because a lot of spring cleaning is going on, a lot of cleanup in communities is going on, so probably going to be fairly easy to find at least some sort of cleanup project.
Most definitely. I think once spring comes, people are thinking about all kinds of things like that and things they want to change and clean up and do. So, yeah, we know that there will be lots of opportunities.
If somebody needs more information about this project, can they contact you or should they just go to the website?
If they go to the website, we'll have a link on our State 4-H webpage where they can go and learn more about it. It's the national page, and it's got, a guide that they can download that's very helpful. They also have a neat piece on, steps to implementing a community service project and some guides for social media and other things. So they can find everything there.
As you mentioned, this is a big part of 4-H and something that we would like to see the 4-Hers get involved with.
Definitely. We know service makes a difference in the lives of young people, and so we would love to see them have more opportunities for it.
That's Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Again, for more information, go to kansas4h.org or contact your county or district extension office. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.